I think people are still coming because we had a hard time finding this place ourselves. So, anyway, so let me introduce myself. I am Bharat Amin, or in Indian ways, Bharat Amin. But a lot of people call me Bharat. That's what Korea called me, Bharat, right? So a lot of times I joke around that even President Modi is trying to change the name from India to Bharat. That's me. So if you haven't read the book, Bharat Matters, go read that book. It's really a great book. So my journey from introduction perspective, I retired as a full-time retired from Huntington Ingalls Industries as Executive Vice President and CIO. I was reporting to the CEO. And if you don't know what HII does, they design and build nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and nuclear-powered submarines for Navy. And then we also do a lot of other work. So I was there for 8 years. Prior to that, I was 17 years at BAE Systems, another defense company, so 24 years in defense world. And 20 years I worked in consumer goods, Electrolux. I used to call Electrolux. I worked 17 years, and pretty much everybody had our appliances in their homes. This was a global company. So that's me. I'm a distinguished fellow of Avasan, this program. I'm also a co-chair of Distinguished Fellow Program. I co-chair with Jim Rinaldi. I don't know if Jim is here or not, but oh, there, Jim, right there. And personally, in the last 2 years, I can say that, my belief is one never retires. The only time you retire is when you kick the bucket. And I'm not ready to kick the bucket. So you have to do something. And I think this opportunity that Avasan has given me, I've learned a lot about AI more, because AI had just come out when I retired, right? So I'm doing a lot of stuff with it now. You might think I might be an expert, but I'm not. So that's me. So I'm going to ask Carmen and Rajiv, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, Carmen Kruger. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey as well. I started in the JAG Corp. I'm a rehabilitated lawyer, but that doesn't always completely happen. So, and then moved into technology, starting with a company called Siebel Systems that was blind to the fact that I had no experience in tech. It took me anyways. And then came to SAP. Worked through the ranks of SAP, did a stint at Qualtrics, did a stint at SAP NS2, where I stood up our cloud line of business, stood up the infrastructure and the capability to deliver those solutions securely, and then moved back to the commercial world where I just left as the Chief Business Officer for the North America business. So Todd is an esteemed client of ours in the past, and it was just an amazing journey for me. So I had a great opportunity to do a lot of different things. Primarily, I was put in places where disruption was required. There you go.
Great.
Yep. Please, sir.
Well, Bharat and Carmen, good to be with both of you. I'm looking forward to our discussion. So my journey, so about 25 years ago in Silicon Valley startups, and my first startup was called efurniture.com. It was to bring instant gratification to the experience of furniture shopping. So over drinks, I can explain more about what happened there. I was still working on that problem. And after that, kind of found my way into healthcare and tech. For the most part, applying emerging technologies like AI and blockchain in the world of tech and bringing that to the enterprise through my consulting career, which I spent about 20 years doing that. The last 7 years or so, 5 of those were spent with Elevance Health, which was formerly called Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, leading all of their digital and technology assets, and including a role briefly to commercialize those assets and kind of offer that to the market. Kind of disrupt the way in which we'd go to market. And then last 2.5 years or so, I've been CEO of a company called Lyric, which is a leader in payment accuracy solutions in healthcare. So a lot of different things, but the common elements have always been tech and applying tech in industry.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's get started. Of course, the title says visionary leadership. So here are the visionary leaders here, and we're going to share our journeys, we're going to share our experiences, what we have gone through. And achieving a hyper growth in age of disruption. Disruption's been going on for a while. So, I mean, there is disruption going on right now. It's a little different, but this has been going on for a while. So, I'm going to talk about my lessons learned and what my passion I have discovered. So, what I tell folks is, I never imagined this, but going from world to boardroom, that's my journey I'm going to share in a little brief here. So I was born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. So that's the first, you see number one there in Africa. And I took my first voyage in 1964. You'll probably start guessing how old I am. In a steamship called SS Kampala. It was a 10 to 12-day journey from Mombasa to Mumbai. It was my first voyage, and I know today we went for whale watching, and people were putting patches and all that. I don't know how I managed, but I didn't have it. At that time, there were no patches. So somehow I managed it, but anyway. Then I studied in India for 14 years. And again, a lot of us think through, and I have 3 children, and we pampered them. Parents always pamper children here. I see that, and I did that myself. But I was never with my parents. My parents actually, we went to India, and they went back to Africa again, because that time, there was independence going on. They thought there might be some upheaval. So they left me behind, and I was living with relatives or my grandmother. And I spent a lot of time there. My parents came, they didn't like it, so they went to London, so they moved in. But I was alone anyway, 14 years. So I did my engineering there, high school and engineering, mechanical engineering. And I always wanted to come to US. Because this is what they said, if you have a dream, you can build your dream here. And my parents were pushing me to go to London. They said, you can come study here. I said, no, I'm going to America. So I came here to do my master's in industrial engineering. So I used to live in England summertime. So that time I was traveling to the number 3 now, the 3rd continent, summer times. And I'll do summer jobs and make enough money and get some fancy stuff and go back to India. But then I made my journey to America, number 4. So that's where I came, and this is where I think I made my entire career, if you want to say. Even though a lot of learnings happen in 1, 2, and 3. I studied here, I got my engineering degree, and 10 years later I got my MBA, because you learn from others saying, if you want to be in management, at that time, you needed to get an MBA. So I got an MBA, and I got a job actually, the company that sponsored me to do MBA gave me a promotion right away, right after graduation. All good and well. And then I met my wife at Rutgers. We have children and all that. Long story short, I did all of that. Now the real story starts for me when in the last job, I was brought in at Huntington Ingalls Industries, one of the division called Newport News Shipbuilding. If you've never heard of them, they design, build nuclear power aircraft carriers and submarine for Navy. And I mean, if you look at that T-shirt, it says 100,000 ton of diplomacy. Whenever that aircraft carrier goes, it brings diplomacy in the world. So I had chance to transform, digitally transform, disrupt all of that. They brought me in, first time they brought a vice president level person from outside. Usually shipbuilding, everybody's grown within. You never get to a VP level unless you've been there for at least 10, 15 years. So that was the first breaking ground for me. And then during my time, I got a chance to go on a sea trial. And it wasn't my chance. Actually, I went to the president of the company and said, I want to go on CVN 78, which is a new Ford class aircraft carrier, on a sea trial. I said, Bharat, no CIO has ever asked for that kind of thing. I said, well, I'm different. And I want to learn about what we put our sailors on. How do they protect our freedom? So they said, yeah, go ahead. And there was a long list of people who wanted to go. He put me in ahead of that. So my fate here is that in 18, I went on a sea trial. And what I'm trying to connect back to is when I was 10 years old, I was an SS Kampala, small steamship. And now I go on a 7-day sea trial, the largest warship in the world. I could have never thought about that, right? So sometimes your fate's gonna take you to places and you're gonna have to reflect on it, that wow, steamship to nuclear power aircraft carrier. So that was my sea trial that I did. And then I always, from world of travel, right? So St. Augustine said that world is like a book. If you don't travel, you've only read the first page. So I really took that by heart, saying, I'm going to travel everywhere because I've already been on 4 or 5 continents. So in 2014, we went to Antarctica. By the way, that was a great trip I had. Of course, you have to go through the Drake Passage if you have not done it. And it's a Drake Shake or a Drake Lake. Shake means it's really bad. Lake means, okay, it's calm waters. And there also had another chance there because Viking had this submersible that takes you down 650 feet to see the bottom of Antarctica. How cool is that? So I signed up for it. My wife said, no, I'm not going. I said, okay. And I saw the bottom of Antarctica. That was another achievement, and I learned a lot about how can some living things be there that below. So there was life there at 600 feet below. And then I completed my last continent, Australia, New Zealand, just this February. So now I can say, hey, I've done all 7 continents. And it has really helped me grow, learn, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different things that don't think I would ever gotten it. And I've brought all that to the boardroom. I actually did similar presentation last year at the Aerospace Corporation boardroom because I'm on a board of Aerospace Corporation and everybody. So moving on, what drives me? Okay, I'll tell you the story about the left side, what it says. The disruptor. By the way, if you have not done it, I would encourage you to do action figure, ChatGPT. There is a small prompt, and you can ask ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, what do you know about me? And create an action figure and put it in a package, and then you attach a picture, and it will create an action figure for you. So find out what your action figure is. But what drives me is my beliefs. I have 5 beliefs. I actually had 4 beliefs, and I've added a 5th one during COVID time. My beliefs are health is wealth. So I believe that if you're healthy, you can do anything. I used to believe knowledge is power. But then in the last 7 years, I realized it's not knowledge, it's imagination. And you've heard what Avasan has been imagination, reimagination. They've been doing the EBS is using that. So I changed from knowledge is power to imagination is superpower. Because I truly believe knowledge will take you from A to B. Imagination will take you from A to anywhere. And that's what Einstein believed in. And I live in Princeton, so I know what Einstein and all his beliefs are. I also believe that you have to leverage your strengths. A lot of times people used to say, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? And a lot of times I've been told, focus on your weaknesses. No. Focus on your strengths. Focus on your team's strengths. And that's how you become a high-performing team. You need to have courage to disrupt, and courage just doesn't come automatically. You're going to have to build courage, and the courage building happens through all this traveling I did, but my story goes around, I could not speak in front of people. And my whole thing changed afterwards. Once I was put on a stage, and I spoke in front of 1,500 people. That built my courage. I started building courage to a point. I did something that I shouldn't have done. I went to go shake hands with the President of the United States, and Secret Service stopped me. And that's when I backed off, because I don't want my courage to go that far. I love my life. And then I added last thing, during COVID times, we were all remote, and I was working with my team remotely. And I realized, what's the most ultimate goal in life for humanity is to be happy. So I said, yeah, I want to be happy. I am happy, but I want to be happy by making others happy. So I was having conversation with my team, one-on-one on Zoom calls.
I would do a weekly call with them. I also did calls with my children, and I have 4 grandchildren, so I would also see them. So that's how those are my beliefs. I self-reflect on them every day. I walk for about 5 miles a day, and when I go walking, I self-reflect to say, did I violate any of my beliefs? And if I did, what would I do differently? So that's what I do. I'm on a board of trustees, I told them, Aerospace Corporation. That story goes like, I thought I'd learned enough about Navy being in the last job, 8 years. I thought because Navy is the largest power. Well, until I went to Aerospace Corporation and what they do for the government, Air Force and Space Force, I think space is a final frontier. Don't you think so? Everybody, there is a huge stuff going on in space. Satellite launches, not only commercial, but military launches and all kinds of things, because there is a belief that whoever controls the space is going to have the power. So there's a lot of stuff going on around that. I'm on a NACD, so I always wanted to get on boards. And I'll tell you, if you are interested in getting on boards, don't wait for retirement from full-time role. You got to start early, right? So I started early by joining NACD, National Association of Corporate Directors. And this is how it goes, right? I went to the CEO. When I was at HII, my story there goes, I was going to retire. Retirement was already announced at Newport News Shipbuilding because I hit my age limit. I mean, that happens, right, in public companies. I was a company officer. Then the corporate CHRO comes to talk to me, and I thought, oh, he's going to tell me about my retirement. He says, Bharat, the board has approved a corporate CIO role, and they want you there. I said, wow, I thought I was going to retire. He said, no, 1-year deal, come up to the corporate, figure out how we're going to bring all the 3 divisions together, cybersecurity, innovation, all the things we want to do, and protect our national assets that we build. How do we do that? So I said, great, I'll do it for 1 year. It turned out to be 4 years after that. Every year they approved an extension. The point I'm making is that when you get opportunity, take it. And I'm also on, SAP's Aerospace and Defense Innovation. I was on a board there. I chair for a couple of years and things like that. Anyway, so that's me. That's what drives me. And I got true passion of serving the country in my last 8 years. I mean, I worked for defense before. Not until I was able to go on aircraft carriers and what Navy does for us, how they protect our freedom, I got connected saying, oh, you know what, this is a great way to serve the country indirectly. So moving on, achieving hyper growth. What did I have to do in the age of disruption? So I had a special issue with leading with in a dual lens. One was national security, and second was innovation. I was brought in at HII at Newport News Shipbuilding to do digital transformation, where we were not allowing our employees to bring their mobile devices in the shipyard because we were afraid that somebody will take a picture and send it out. But it was not about that. It was more about, if we want to do digital transformation, how do we enable employees to get more digital? So the idea was to get them familiar with the mobile devices and stuff like that. Innovation was, we were going to do transformation, so it was integrated digital shipbuilding. How do we go from paper drawings? By the way, I don't know, do you guys know what aircraft carrier looks like or how big it is? Any idea? Some of you said yes. Oh, I hear a couple of them saying yes. So it weighs 100,000 tons. It's 24 stories high. It has 5 acres on the landing where the aircrafts take off and land. 5 acres. So we call that sovereignty of 5 acres that goes around traveling everywhere. It carries about 180 planes, jets. And it carries 5,000 sailors and pilots. 5,000. Imagine the cooks must be going crazy, serving 3 meals a day, right? For 5,000 people. But that's how big the aircraft carrier is. And they were being built using paper drawings. To the stories where we heard was people had to carry rolls of paper drawings and climb up into the ship or wherever and some were getting injured because the paper was so heavy. And then they have to look at it and figure out how to build what that thing they have to do. We transformed that to a digital pad, an iPad type device. They get the work instructions, digital drawings, and they get instructions, work instruction of 5 things they have to do today. That was the transformation that we did. Driving hypergrowth through talent and technology synergy. So I learned, shipyard was more like Navy, top-down command. So it's command comes from the top. And what I wanted to do was empower the bottom end, right? So one of the things I had to do was completely transform my technology group and how can I empower people. So you probably heard of Gallup Strength Finders and all that. I made everybody take Gallup and we said, how are we gonna leverage our strengths? And then I empowered our employees to go do things. Things like we had a chain of command on how to get PC approval for employees. And I said, why does it have to come to VP level? I said, a direct manager should be able to approve it. So we got all that out. Now, direct manager says, if you need a PC, you get it. So that was the kind of thing. On a technology synergy side, I don't know, Newport News Shipbuilding was the first private 5G in the country. Did you know that? We were the first one. And our goal was that how do we take 600 acres where we build all these ships? How do we connect people? How do we connect all the work centers? So we had to use 5G because of the IoTs and all the things we were bringing. And I told you about the digital work instructions. Disruption as a catalyst for purpose-driven transformation, that was more about how do we move from paper drawing to 3D. We did additive manufacturing, so instead of getting parts built from outside, we were printing them kind of thing. So those are the kind of transformations that we did in achieving hypergrowth. And this is kind of like a details on why we did it and what we did it, but I think I already talked about it. So moving on, complex solutions by leveraging technologies. And I think I already talked about some of these. So wireless was 5G, 3D printing, that component that we printed, that used to take 1 year of lead time to get it from a third-party supplier. Now we can print it in 15 weeks, 16 weeks. So we cut down a lot of lead time from 1 year to 15 weeks kind of thing. That is still being tested right now. You talk about autonomous vehicles, right? The Waymo. I mean, I was at Phoenix and I was just waiting there and they said, oh, Waymo is the biggest, largest Uber-type services in Phoenix. And I didn't believe it when the mayor of Phoenix talked about it. And I go there and suddenly I was waiting and there's a Waymo comes by, waiting for somebody to come pick up and take them. So autonomous vehicles, these are all the technologies that are coming. A lot of technologies that came in defense are coming into technologies into commercial world, right? So a lot of autonomous stuff is going on right now in the defense world. Internet of Things, you probably know about how smart factories and lights outs, all of that is happening as we speak today. And you're gonna see factories with no lights and no people, and it's producing things. Data analytics, we were the first one way back when, about 8-10 years ago, we realized that you need data to make decisions. But decisions were being made at different places, different times, and data was generated everywhere. So we created this whole lab, we call it a DFL, it was a dogfish lab, and don't ask me, somebody created a dogfish, there's a beer called dogfish. So they created a dogfish lab, and that's where we had our first 4 scientists, data scientists. And now analysis and decision making is becoming more and more prevalent because scientists are now figuring out what's the rate of injuries, why the injuries are happening, and all that, and they're figuring out those things. AR, VR, you all know about it, and Gen AI and agentic AI is also coming big time right now. So moving on, cyber resilience and trust in hyper-connected world. That was one thing that I was asked to do when I was brought into the corporate office, right? So we implemented zero trust architecture, and it's about what is No trust is the new trust. Think about that. Because you can't trust anything. However, I also learned before you implement AI or agentic AI, trust is new currency. So if you're going to do something like that, make sure it's trustworthy, the data and all the things you're doing. AI and cybersecurity is a dual edge. It's it helps a lot, but if it goes into wrong hands, it can really hurt you, right? So that was another thing. And the strategic imperative was, how can now cyber risks have become business risks? Because you've seen a lot of incidents happening where it can actually stop things, and we don't want really these kind of things happening in defense world. So this was a big play for me, and even though I knew enough about cyber and how to connect all these things, but I realized that cyber resilience is very important. And now my next worry is quantum, right? Quantum is coming. We talked about it. It could come in next 4 years. But I know some nation states are trying to get it in 2 years. Because, there is a saying, right? China always said, steal now, decrypt later. So all the data that I thought was encrypted, who cares? Zeros and ones they are stealing. Well, they can decrypt with quantum when the quantum comes. So be aware of that, quantum resiliency. So future-backed leadership, imagining what's next and building it today is, we heard earlier, right? How do you future-proofing? That's what I'm talking here in terms of how do you do that? And I took an approach where I believe in order to do that, it's a mindset change. And mindset change starts with visionary leaders. So I had to understand myself that how am I going to move? We used to hire the smartest people, right, with highest IQ. Remember that? And then we went to saying, we need to emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. We need to bring leaders and people with emotional intelligence.
I was joking. I said I wasn't the one they hired with the highest IQ.
You're going to talk about that, right? Okay.
Sure, why not?
And now we are moving into DQ. You can look up digital intelligence. There is a Digital Intelligence Institute, which talks about a lot of things about you have to play it right. It has to be responsible. You have to bring ethics in it. You have to bring privacy in it. So I created this whole idea of how do you go from IQ to EQ to DQ, and then you do digital transformation experience. That's me showing from a smart-looking guy, intelligent guy, to going to a Thor with a big hammer, because you're going to transform and you're going to disrupt. I created my 5Ds, and maybe I challenge you to create your own 5Ds. What are they? If you're going to be doing things in a digital world, digital intelligence, what are your 5Ds? Okay. Looks like I'm running out of time here. So anyway, these are mine daily. What are the things you're going to do daily? Practice those things. Do a disruption. Disruption doesn't matter. You have to bring courage. You got to, of course you have to deliver things, right? Bring diversity of thought into it, and also make sure you're driven by something. So I'm going to leave a final thought with 7 things to do disrupt. I'm not going to spell it out, but they are all there. Dare to challenge status quo, inspire the future, simplify the complexities, execute. We need to rewire for trust. Remember I talked about that. Partner with your collaborate and all that, unleash the strengths, and then test and transform. And I'm going to say, in the age of disruption, it's not the biggest who wins, it's the boldest who wins. So now I'm going to ask, can you share your journeys and things that...
We will do it, absolutely. So we'll do it relatively quickly. From 2 different industry perspectives, you'll do it from this healthcare industry, and I'll do it a little bit from the technology side, but based on some of that military experience. So let me offer a couple suggestions here, no slides. This is more about how you approach it with your team. Remember, I came from a $5.4 billion business that had to transform significantly across a number of metrics, top line, bottom line metrics, profitability, and then innovation added to that. So in that transformation, there's a couple of key things that I tried to do with the team. not alone, but and lessons learned. And we spoke a little bit about this yesterday. One is creating shared consciousness and what we call commander's intent. Shared consciousness allows you to have the trust amongst your organization to allow you to make those decisions that you need to make independently. In a time of high disruption, you cannot be micromanaging your way through it. It will not work. The speed won't work. And also, it's a very distasteful way to do a transformation. And commander's intent allows you then to make sure people are clear on the end state you want to achieve. Shared consciousness, trust, commander's intent, the end state you want to achieve. With those two empowerments, you can allow your teams to do what they need to do. That said, I'll use the term disciplined agility amidst disruption. That does not mean it's a free rein, the Animal House picture that came up during the discussion today, for everybody to let's just go and do it. There are some guardrails associated with how you do that. So I will use a few terms here. Embracing that disciplined agility is important, and it's important for you to establish those guardrails with the team. Don't be shy about them. It's almost kind of bred into commander's intent. And the last thing I'll say is there are some things what I call unpopular necessities. I actually used ChatGPT for that one. Unpopular necessities are things that we are going to have to do in the process of a transformation. They can include budget cuts. They can include personnel cuts. They can include some things that we know are distasteful. We spoke about this yesterday. We have to be somewhat unapologetic about that. Not that we don't have to be humane about the way we do these sort of unpopular necessities. We have to explain the why, but we need to execute them with efficiency and with humanity. Denying that they're there or using corporate euphemisms is really an irritant for the people who are affected by it. And that was something that was very important in that. 2 minutes, it's yours, baby.
All right, so maybe I'll frame this in through the lens of our company, Lyric. And so Lyric, it exists in the world of healthcare. So $5 trillion, so healthcare is $5 trillion of the GDP, of which, one would argue that about $1 trillion that is kind of wasted, non-value-added spend. And so Lyric's role is to chip away at that non-value-added spend and optimize it so that, healthcare can be more cheaper, more affordable, more accessible to the US population. It's been around for 30 plus years through various, ownership structures and interests, and started out very much as an on-prem traditional software company. And this is when I happened to be brought in as CEO about 3 years ago to transform the company to be more contemporaneous in terms of its tech future, as well as then in that process take advantage of all the new capabilities that we may be able to develop through that transformation. So I remember this vividly. Last year we had I think late August or September we had a board meeting. And, we had kind of charted out a course where we said, hey, nothing secret sauce here or rocket science. We had to take on-prem software, move it to the cloud, make it multi-tenant so that we can start to configure and deploy new features more quickly, shorten speed, shorten the time to market, and increase value for our customers and all that good stuff. Nothing particularly remarkable, but complex to pull off because there's lots of moving pieces, clients and different architectures, timelines, what have you. But the overall program was going relatively well, and we're well ahead of our targets. I think last year we had set a target of 50% of our business moving to our target architecture, and I think we're at about 60 or 70%. So I thought we had a pretty good board meeting, and we all walked out high-fiving each other, and on to the next challenge. The next day, it turns out Satya Nadella put out a clip that says, "Hey, SaaS is dead. The world is moving to agentic and AI." And so some member of our board happened upon that, and it's like, "Hey, you told me this whole song and dance about moving to on-prem and SaaS and how great that is, and I hear Satya talking about this thing is dead, and we're like, what's going to happen in the future for our company?" I was like, "Okay, so well, yes, beyond SaaS, there's agentic and all the stuff that we know and love about SaaS is probably going to morph into something very different in the future." So that then led to the topic for the next board meeting is like, what's next for Lyric? And what's next was really, as we looked at and we stepped back and looked at the landscape of what's happening all around us, there's all the, sort of the software companies that revolve around health plans and health insurance companies in the US that have their own profit pools, EBITDA, growth, et cetera. And we all sort of either acquire other companies or we grow organically. The growth levers are somewhat defined and well known. On the side here is this super intelligence that's building. There's like roughly 400 plus large language models, and there's that's kind of rapidly changing every day. So as Bharat sort of put in his prompts for creating his action figures, that's probably the simplest thing you can do. Right? There's more and more sophisticated things that are happening. The most prominent thing of which is that the moats that existed for SaaS, i.e. users using user experiences to do workflow, to do actions, tasks, etc., is going to get replaced by someone chatting with an LLM and saying, go get this done, and the agents will take care of the rest. So then that mode of you sort of building feature-rich applications starts to go away, and then you go, all right, so then what? Right? The second disruption is, well, maybe you have proprietary data and you can train your models and your algorithms on your proprietary data sets, and that creates a mode. But if the superintelligence being over here with LLMs ultimately doesn't need that data, then do you really have a mode? And then the last mode you have is potentially a network. We're installed in 100 plus customers, and we've got a huge ecosystem of partners and whatnot that kind of organize around Lyric, much like in a much smaller scale compared to SAP that has a huge ecosystem of partners and capabilities. But that too can be easily disrupted, by someone that's looking at it, through a different lens. So if you look at all of that and go, well, you could be super stressed about it and say, well, what do you do? Or you say, well, maybe it'll pass, it may not be as bad as you think it is. All of those are bad options, right? So you have to take what is a disruptive opportunity or a disruptive threat and turn it into an opportunity. So the way we did that was, all right, we said the core business is the core business, and we need to continue to run it in the leanest manner possible, use more AI, use more agentic software, and disrupt it so that the core business grows healthy, remains like the core growth rates in the core business remain healthy, and that we're achieving, sort of the profit targets that we're setting with our board. But then we have to experiment. And the experimentation mindset has to be like, all right, let's look at what other things we could do. And then we call those edges, so the core business and edge businesses. And the edge businesses, we deliberately under-resource it and starve it. We kind of let them fend for themselves and be innovative and scrappy, while we continue to sort of feed the core and can sort of drive more revenue and growth through that. But on the edge, we experiment. We fail fast, we pivot, we do things that are unconventional. It's not much different than what SAP did all those years ago when they created HANA. They didn't create it in Germany. They sent a team out to Silicon Valley to go create HANA, right? So Shai Agassi and team did that. So it's the same concept, which is take it out of the core, put it on the edge, and then over time, as the edge gains traction, you move the center of gravity from the core to the edge, and then you scale the edges. So therefore, this conflict that usually exists between, this is what we do as a business, this is where we need to go in the future, but that traverse that needs to happen, that needs to balance for growth, EBITDA, profitability, et cetera, that's very tricky. So in doing it this way, which is to create the edges which didn't suck resources from the core, but were staffed with, and I call them ninjas, that were scrappy, that kind of did things, sort of in a startup lean manner. And then as those proof points sort of became evident, then we could sort of migrate the business over to the edge. That's the whole philosophy and how we're approaching it at Lyric.
Wow. We're up, right? We are up. I think we're running out of time. We
Yes.
have a lot of things to share, but we don't have time.
Lots of things to share. We also have a cocktail hour. We've got dinner
There you go.
together. So thanks. Let's give our panelists a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.